Hey everyone, JSD Cool here, and welcome to another Skinny Man development video. In the last video, I did a bunch of modularization stuff, which, quite frankly, isn't the most necessary thing for the next update, but is pretty useful tech debt to have gotten rid of anyway. In this video, I'm going to be attempting to implement the primary feature of this update, which, I'll say it now, is going to be rotation of various stage components. So, let me give a crude example. So while this will have a relatively large impact on 3D, I also do plan on doing this in 2D, although, 2D is going to be less interesting for this. 3D is where it's at, though. So what's hopefully going to be able to happen is you're going to be able to select mostly just ground, but maybe a couple other things will be rotatable, like so. And then instead of like arrows or in the other case, the scaling things, we're going to have a new thing for rotation, hopefully going to be circles that you can drag around and rotate things like other 3D building games. And then it'll rotate stuff. I don't know why I'm explaining to you what rotation is. You probably already know, but that's what we're going to be trying to go after today in this video. Now, rotating things in a graphical manner is actually extremely easy in processing, as there are literally functions that interface with the graphics API that do that. But the bigger challenge for us, and what I'm really going to be working on, is the physics side of things, because we actually have to move the vertices so that the physics collision system has a rotated object to collide with instead of something that's standing still. And that's the complex part that we're going to get started on now. Now, the way that GPUs rotate things is they use some fancy transformation matrices to take in vertices and convert their coordinates to the new coordinates that are at the visually correct location. So we're going to be doing a very similar thing, except, on the CPU. Now, to make this process a smoother experience for me, I will be making some utility functions here to do some things that the matrices just don't have implemented themselves in processing. This processing, despite not having this on the reference for some reason, does actually provide relatively functional matrix classes. Alright, I think I've gotten all the functions that I need from the utility class for now created. This, of course, includes a function to multiply 4 vertices by a transformation matrix at once. Basically, this just converts those vertices into a matrix, does a matrix multiplication, and then creates them back to, or takes them back to vertices. I hope that this is more efficient than just multiplying each vertice by the matrix individually, because there's a method for that, but I thought this might be more effective because this also works. We'll see. If this isn't more effective, I can just replace this method with individually multiplying these, and everything should still work. The other thing I did was create a method to generate a proper 3D rotation matrix, where you pass in an XYZ angle and it'll return a matrix that does that rotation in theory. I got this off of Wikipedia, so hopefully this works. I think this works, though. Alright, the hard part, I say in quotation marks, as I know that this is not actually the hard part, is done. So yeah, this is the code to basically, so to catch up on what I'm doing, I'm working on making the ground class rotatable. I created this new interface so that the actual, interface functionality rotating stuff is a little bit easier. But regardless, I've created the thing that determines all the vertices positions, and it's relatively simple. It looks like a lot, mostly because of this, but it's all very simple. So walking through pretty quickly, the standard getting the group for offset information, we will not be having, at least not at this time, the group's ability to change the rotation of their objects. I feel like that would probably be a bit too complex. Anyhow, so this gets the group, then we reset the transformation matrix to the default, or to the identity matrix. We do the rotation calculation, and we calculate the center point of this component here, and slap that into the transformation matrix as a translation. That way, we just have to do one multiplication and everything, and it'll be rotated and moved into the right location. Then we reset all the vertices, which has an E in front of it for some reason. This is what takes up most of the space here, and that's just because we have to set the XYZ coordinate of every single vertice, and because this is a box, there are 8 of them, but it's ultimately pretty simple. We simply have the half of the length, variables here representing half of the length, and then we're setting all these vertices to either negative or positive, because we're setting these vertices up around the origin so that once the matrix comes in for the transformation, it will rotate around the origin and then move it, or translate them to the position they're supposed to be, and that's generally how transformation matrices work. So then once we've reset all the vertices to their original positions, and also we're not just creating new p vectors to hold this stuff here, because allocating new heap memory, even in Java, that does have a cost associated with it. So just modifying what we have is faster, and potentially the just-in-time compiler can find a way to optimize this. Maybe, don't know. Anyhow, after that, we simply call this method twice here to simply apply that transformation to each of these vertices, as I've shown in the utility class. And then that is simply that. I haven't gotten any farther than this, because next step is, I guess, render where all these vertices are to make sure that these rotations are working properly. And then I suppose I actually have to make a way to change the rotation. And that comes later. Okay, so to start with, without any rotations present, it does appear to be working. As you can see, I have these little boxes set at the corners of all the ground pieces here to indicate where the theoretical vertices are, and considering that without a rotation right now, they've all been correctly positioned. Now I just gotta figure out how am I gonna actually test a rotation in any sort of manner with these. I did not think that through. Alright, I have gotten a button in the toolbox here for rotation, and I've started implementing it for at least 3D here. 2D is going to be another thing, but rotations will be available in 2D. I do currently plan on that being the case. But yeah, as you can see, I got the one axis that I'm going to try rotating for now. We'll get the other 3 axes in here in time, because that should just be copy or pasting a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I got this ring here that you're going to be using to rotate it. I got to figure out how all of that stuff works. Alright, I've managed to get detection for when you're highlighting on the ring in place, but yeah, I also put in the highlight detection for the other ones. I just haven't rendered the non-highlighted version of those yet. I'll do that eventually, but for now, I can't be bothered. That's mostly it. Alright, so as you can see, I've put in the various other rings, because I figured, well, I'm actually just doing everything right now, I might as well get them at least visually rendered there. And also, theoretically, rotation should be working right now, so we can give it a test. Now, keep in mind that the actual shape itself will not be rotating, but these red boxes on the corners is what we're actually going to be testing the rotation of right now, because I haven't gotten the actual rendering logic to rotate the whole thing as rendered. Now, here goes. And those... they disappeared immediately. That's not good. Okay, I found where these dots went. They're all the way over this way for some reason. That tells me that there is some sort of transformation going on in the wrong order. But hey, if I zoom out here, and okay. Well, okay, apart from the fact that clearly this doesn't work how I wanted it to, rotation transformation aside, it is also quite annoying that, yeah, I don't know why it's moving. Oof. That's not good. There's a divide by 0 going on somewhere right now. Okay, but yeah, I'm not too sure why everything is rotating into those specific things. It shouldn't change its rotation until I move the mouse. It's also clearly not doing enough, so I gotta go back to the drawing board and how I'm actually calculating the rotations, and applying them for that matter. Okay, I'm not entirely sure how I've managed this, but yeah, all the things are now here. If I select this, okay, those ones are particularly related to this. Yeah, everything's just now floating around 0, 0. Okay, that actually kind of makes a little bit of sense. But why are they not translated into place anymore? That's what doesn't make any sense. I mean, this looks cool, but it's not what I wanted. Alright, that actually turned out to be a pretty simple issue. I just forgot to recalculate the centers, or the center position at the right point in time. So now that I've done that, hopefully this will rotate these boxes in place. Oh, that's not rotate. Hopefully this will rotate these boxes in place instead of rotating them about the origin. Okay, that's the wrong direction. the wrong... Oh, well, it is... Okay, well, it's kind of the right direction. Again, it's not doing what I want it to do entirely. But this is better. Better by far. But you see, if I go, like, far away, it's now going to start doing some weird things versus going, like, really close up. So, you know, it's got some work to do, that's for sure. But this certainly is working a little bit better. Okay, so I've gotten the, as you can see, I've gotten these rings to try rotating with the shape, but I'm starting to get very confused about what's going on. I mean, I haven't, how you select the rings, I haven't adjusted that to work with these new angles, but they're supposed to show what angle you're supposed to be rotating in. So look, if I select that, all of a sudden it rotated for some reason. I don't know what's going on with that. But yeah. Weird stuff is happening, and I think I'm going to need to go back to the drawing board on how this rotation system calculates the rotation. But other than that, the actual like vertex multiplication system seems to be working properly. So that's pretty good. Okay, so I have no idea if I'm on the right track here at all, but what I currently have on the screen is I have a display. So these three big red lines here, each of these is projecting the mouse, or the current mouse position through many iterations onto a plane, or onto the various planes for these circles here, or for these circles here. And here, when it's not touching anything, they just go off into the distance as we iterate through everything. So from the very closest point to the camera, it'll project that, and it projects it all the way down. But then you can see here, once one of these lines touches the circle, at that point, that circle becomes selected. Now, this is not really what I want, considering it's selecting stuff all the way out here, and I obviously have no idea what I'm doing, but maybe this is a little bit closer to what we want, because ideally, what I'm gonna want, we can move around here, is I'm gonna want that when I select, say, this one, or this here, I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously, I want what I'm, like, what the mouse is over to actually be selecting. So I might need to do this a little bit differently. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do this in a different way, evidently. Oh yeah, but the general idea is that once I've selected and clicked on something, the movement of my mouse should make these lines touch whatever the closest point is. Here, actually, let me try doing something to make only one of these lines actually appear. Okay, so here you can see we now only have one line which is interacting with the red circle here. Now, ideally what I do is, what would happen is, as I, move my mouse around here, it's selecting, the closest point to the red circle, but then as we go around the bottom here, it'd select, more towards the bottom of the red circle. Clearly that's not actually happening. I mean, and the main reason why is because, it's looking for this. What I'm gonna, in the end, what I'm gonna do for when you're actually, like, selecting for rotating, it's actually gonna take, a point of the mouse, and it's going to, like, just find where the nearest point on your selected circle is. But in terms of selecting the circle, yeah, I got work to do here. Alright, so I think I'm on the right track now. So, on my mouse now, you will see a red cube, which is correlated to the mouse. Yes, it's always at the mouse position, but at the same time, it is also always in the X-plane of the shape, or, if I'm smart enough, right on the red circle here. No matter what the camera's orientation is. This should hopefully make these next steps of actually doing the rotation correctly a bit easier. But what's more impressive and important is if I rotate this thing in a direction, say like this, the plane in which this box exists has now followed the rotation of the X-plane on this object, hence making the rotation from an already rotated state viable and modular. Alright, progress. So, this we've seen before, but what we have not seen before is this. And it doesn't feel like absolute crap when I'm doing this. I finally got it figured out. My plan that I had cooked up in my head kind of worked. Actually, I'll put a picture on screen right now of this thing I drew on the whiteboard for kind of how I was planning this out. So yeah, that looks like it works pretty good. We can go in the red here, and that also feels good. That works. That's rotating. This is back where we started. But then the z-axis, the blue one, a little bit different. Oh wait, no, wait. Why is it working? This wasn't working before. Also, it's snap. I'm not entirely sure about the snapping there. I think there's probably some sort of like divide by zero thing that it's getting through there. Okay, that is weird. I swear I didn't really change anything, but that was... Oh, there it is. Now it's acting like it was... What? I have no clue why that was... You saw that, right? That was just doing the other thing. Anyhow, not what I'm too concerned about right now. What I'm more concerned about is that, yeah, multi-axis movements are not entirely what I think they are. And when you get it wrong, you can get it really wrong. And then it starts doing this. So clearly the axes that I'm trying, or that I'm visually rotating around, and the one that the, angle is being calculated off of, is not the same as what the actual axis is rotating around is. And I don't know what those axes actually are. I think, though, no matter what, the red one works. So the red one, the x-axis, which actually I think that's the last rotation applied. If we go in the code here, scroll up here. Yeah, x is the last rotation applied. So that would make sense that this one is always working, because the axis that I'm rotating around here is always correct, because all rotations are applied to it. I'd hedge a bet that with this one, we don't want to apply the X rotation, and with Z, we only want to apply the Z well, not even Z rotation doesn't really mean anything at that point. But yeah, that's just for the axis of rotation, and this also does mean, unfortunately, with how things currently are working with rotation, these all these circles will not remain perpendicular to each other, which is unfortunate. But is the sad truth of how I'm going to have to do things, as the current system of rotation doesn't allow for fully, or the rotations as you would maybe expect it to happen. Oh, but yeah, look, this happens at any angle. But yeah, in the future, maybe a future update, I will figure out how to do this properly. Maybe a different rotation matrix will be involved. But anyhow, I'm going to try getting these axes aligned properly now. Alright, major progress. Things are actually feeling very functional right now. So, as you would expect, I can rotate the things on the axis, but you might see something a little bit weird now. Only the red one is now rotating, and that is unfortunately because of how this is... Because apparently that's how my rotation matrix works, apparently. The axes do not stay perpendicular to each other at all times. Rotating in the z-axis, or the blue here, everything does stay in its current state, but none of the other axes or rotating in this axis particularly will not keep everything entirely parallel to one another. But hey, nothing else moves when you rotate this axis. So there's that. Now I have noticed some right here weird behaviors, and I cannot pinpoint the cause of this. That when I click, sometimes when there's already a rotation, when I click on another axis to rotate. Okay, it's not. Oh, okay. Sometimes when I do this, it will just completely invert the current rotation, and I have no idea why it does this. It does not make logical sense to me how or why this happens. Okay, I figured out what the problem was with everything just suddenly jerking into a different direction. Turns out that the vectors that I was using to compute the angle were actually facing the opposite, or one of them was facing the opposite direction that it should have. So when measuring the angle between the same point, it was giving 180 degrees instead of 0 degrees, which is why it seemed to do that. So every axis was really just flipping every time you clicked on it, even if it didn't seem like it. So, but yeah, as you can see now, it's all working correctly. Rotations are happening logically. Which means we can finally move on to the next step. Okay, exciting moment. We're about to see a bunch of off-grid stuff. It works! And I'm not seeing any issues so far. Better than what I expected. Okay, that's one axis. Ooh. Wait, what? Okay, the darkness of that top doesn't make much. Hang on. If I continue rotating this. Why is that black? Hang on. I never changed the fill color. I'm very, extremely confused right now as to why there is. Let's try to get inside of that. It's kind of difficult now that I've set the near clipping plane so far. Okay, the inside looks properly colored. Why is the outside of that completely uncolored? Regardless, this. Oop, that's the wrong one. This one. This appears to be working outside of, yeah, like, the shadows looking to do weird things at certain angles. That also means the camera's at certain angles, I guess. But, again, that's just issues with the shadow system that I don't really feel like trying to fix, considering, as is the shadow system was a pain in the ass to make. There it is again! Alright, I managed to fix the problem. It turns out that, yeah, the winding order for the vertices actually does matter, despite the fact that we are decidedly in OpenGL, and also decidedly both faces of each triangle are being drawn, but I guess the direction that the normal points in is still necessary for our shadow shader here to be able to determine how bright or black, I guess, the surface is. So yeah. But yeah, other than that, it's rendering correctly and visually here. This is also, mind you, this is just in 3D, and this is also just rendering. Not actually colliding. If we quickly go start hopping around the level here, you'll see that the hitbox of this thing is decidedly not changing as I'm rotating it right now. But do not worry, as it will not stay that way for very long. You see, this is quite possibly the simplest change I have made in this entire video. I just gotta replace the call to this function here, or the argument for this function, with that. Oh, if that was actually how I spelled it. Like I said, replace it with that, and then there should be a completely functional collision for the rotated shape. Alright then, so now that I've implemented that fix, everything seems to be operating correctly here in terms of unrotated shapes. But now the rotated shapes have their collision correctly, or are being collided with correctly. You can see, okay, I mean, now is when I guess you can see that the 3D hitbox is indeed a box and not just directly centered on the player's feet. Yeah, we apparently will float on slopes in 3D. I didn't think about that. Now, if I had a velocity-based system to get you out of the ground that wasn't just like move you to the top of it, this would actually launch you, but it doesn't. Anyhow, yeah, I think I've sufficiently proven that collision in 3D works and was by far the simplest change I've made all episode. Alright, so we've got rotations rendering in 2D. As you can see, you can't actually rotate stuff into 2D yet, but as you can see, I've got both what the 2D rotations are going to be and the full fat 3D or 2D representation of the 3D rotation. As you can see, this is what these things actually look like in 3D mode, rotated as you'd expect. And yeah, it was surprisingly easy to get this stuff rendering. I mean, effectively what I did to make this work is I just took I just copied all the vertices from the 3D shape, set all their Z values to 0, and then rendered the shape as if it was the 3D shape effectively. And this is just, you know, rendering the 4 vertices Interesting. Now, I haven't done collision for this yet. That's also relatively simple to do. But yeah, besides that, next is really actually doing the rotation in 2D. And to be clear, you'll only be able to actually achieve this rotation in 2D. If you want this, you'll actually have to be in 3D mode / in a 3D stage to get something like this. Although, not saying that you wouldn't be able to hack your way into something like this in 2D. I'm just saying, or in a 2D only stage. I'm just saying it does not make sense in a 2D stage to make a way to rotate this. I mean, heck, both of those axes are basically just going to be vertical lines. That just won't work. Alright, collision, that was pretty plain and simple, as you can see. You know, it's just passing the appropriate vertices in, and obviously you're just going to stand on top of that, of you know, this one in its entirety. Actually, just thought of this. What happens if I, well, you can see that it's a cube, I guess. That's actually kind of cool. Interesting. Anyway, okay, wow, this was actually really easy to implement here. So, I mean, here. Simply, you see we're in 2D, I'm rotating the shape. Everything feels good. Yeah, there's not too much more to this. I'm actually also not entirely sure what else I need to do if I go to 3D mode. Oh, dang it. That's stupid. Whatever. See, they do get rotated in 3D as well, as you would expect, and yeah. I don't know if there's anything else I really have to specifically do for general purpose rotation. So I think the other thing I really have to do, at least right now, is copy all the rotation stuff over to the holograms, obviously, because those are essentially just ground without a collision box. So that should just be a copy-paste job for all the rotation stuff, and yeah. Then I think rotation stuff is done unless I think of anything else. Okay, actually, I did just remember a couple little things quickly. The first one is the only one I can actually show, which is grid mode for rotation. So, yeah. With increments of 10 degree, or, well, not necessarily 10, but whatever number is specified in this box degrees, so 90 degree increments. And that's not 90 degrees based off the current situation. That would be 90 degrees global. So 90 degrees from 0, which it's basically at 0 right now. Not the most useful thing in the world. But yeah, grid mode is now implemented for rotation. And the other thing was saving / serializing. Kind of important. And that's in there now. Alright then, I've copied all the rotation stuff over from the ground class to the hologram class, and I believe this thing is a hologram. Not really an easy way to check right now, considering, well, I mean, I could move the player over here, but I don't want to do that, but considering everything functions with rotation now, ooh, I don't know. Yeah, that was relatively easy, but man, I'm just realizing now that I wrote a lot of code specific to just rotating things that goes inside the class itself, and that does need local class variables because it's an interface and stuff. Oh man. And also the fact that the shadowing system, like the lines between the various shadow textures, can be seen when you rotate things at the right angles. How did that happen? But yeah, anyhow, yeah, I think that's about it for rotations. That has been successful. So, with that, I'm going to have to say thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Just a reminder that these are all development features that are not yet released, and they will be released at some point in the future. But if you did want to check out the current version of this game now, then head on to the link. Well, it is linked in the description, and I see you all next time. Bye.